Good afternoon. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to share the idea of efficiency reserves and what we should do about it. And it matters to universities because tapping the efficiency reserves has the potential to reduce emissions and generate financial returns on the order of 10 to 30%, which is a lot higher than the negative 1.6% of endowments last year. Now, why the word reserve in a climate change conference, which is normally preceded by the word oil? Well, I come from an oil and gas background. I have personally drilled and fracked about 36 gas wells in North America. You're welcome. And that first career, that silver lining of it, was it gave me a chance to see large-scale energy development up close. And that's important because we face a large-scale challenge as well as an opportunity. So let's get into it. Perfect. Starting with the challenge. If we add up the non-residential, non-commercial, non-industrial, that is commercial buildings in the US, the number is staggering. There's a building for about every 60 Americans. And while I'm optimistic that the energy supply side continues to become decarbonized, the energy demand side is just not doing its part. More than half the buildings standing today are between 30 and 100 years old, with generally inefficient systems that don't really match their site needs anymore. Simply put, buildings' energy demand is contributing substantially and directly to climate change. But if viewed with maybe a wildcatter's perspective, this same energy demand also presents itself as a massive opportunity, about an energy resource potential of about $150 billion nationally per year. It's a massive economic prize that is begging to be tapped. But if we're going to talk about exploiting and producing a resource at this scale, then there is only one group that we should be thinking about who has the idea of how to do that at the scale we need. And that's these guys. So yes, at a climate change conference, I'm advocating that we act and behave more like the oil and gas industry. That is, we should be thinking about energy less in terms of discrete services and products and more in terms of holistic energy production. Just maybe without the oil spills. Before we get to the reserves, let's talk about the resource base. So if we sum up all the fuels required to deliver our HVAC, lighting, server, plug load demands in our buildings, it's an enormous amount of energy that's locked away. The efficiency reserves, like oil and gas, represent the fraction of that resource base that can be produced with today's technology and today's prices, kind of like basically savings. Efficiency reserves can be produced with a variety of technologies like more efficient equipment, customized sequences of operations, and smarter controls. And in our experience at Carbon Lighthouse, the energy efficiency reserve potential in a building ranges between 5 and 55%, with an average somewhere in the 20s. Now, like oil and gas, there's no known fixed number for the efficiency reserves in the US, but the EIA estimates it to be about $45 billion per year, which is in line with our own estimates. And universities make up actually a fairly significant part of these efficiency reserves, meaning there is a huge market for reduced operating expenses, translating to reinvestment in your schools. And the best part about the efficiency reserves, a problem the oil and gas industry wished that it had, was that the efficiency reserves are actually growing. Despite some leveling of the energy intensity of buildings, increasing average square footage, increasing building count, and increased utilization in the space is actually driving the resource base upwards. And as the resource base goes upwards, so do the efficiency reserves, helped and assisted by rising energy prices and better technology. Reserve growth is a problem that Exxon wished it was faced with today. But why is there no Standard Oil of the efficiency reserves? It's kind of odd, really. Efficiency reserves, by producing them, it saves lots of money, which everybody likes. It creates a lot of local jobs, which politicians gush about. It's massive, as we talked about, which means Wall Street should be lining up for it. And it generally makes buildings more comfortable and saves the environment, which almost everyone really likes. So why is this so hard? Where is our Standard Oil today? Well, for starters, we in the industry are not actually addressing the efficiency reserves. Let's start with the contractors. Contractors are the ones responsible for maintaining and running our buildings, basically so they don't fall down. But most of what they do is they charge labor hours and they charge a markup on equipment. Consulting engineering firms play a really important role in our buildings. They have a lot of expertise in given systems, but their main output at the end of the day is a list of recommendations, not a proposal, and generally they don't do a lot of implementation work themselves. Efficiency financing companies are a really important enabler. They underwrite deals in the $500,000 to $1 million plus size, usually going for 1% to 5% interest spread. But they generally don't do any engineering, and they generally don't do any project management, which is important for the efficiency reserves. Analytics and dashboards, I'm from the Bay Area, so I love them, and I like to trash them at the same time. They produce a really valuable insight into buildings, which is data. But data itself is not exactly a product. It's an enabler. It helps with the efficiency reserves, but it's not the same thing as the reserves themselves. Equipment companies and ESCOs, they generally sell large equipment and chillers and cooling towers, and they use some performance contracting to justify the sale of the equipment with a long-term payout. And energy supply companies can certainly reduce the cost of the energy demand, but they generally don't really touch the energy demand itself. So all of these are really important. They all provide value, but none of them are really focused on the efficiency reserve. So building owners and operators are left wondering what to do. And it's one of many concerns. Universities, like buildings, have many concerns. Accreditation, rankings, prestige, appearance, keeping those faculty members happy. I'm guessing the HVAC operation is not at the top of the list, and why should it be? The other unfortunate part about the efficiency reserves is it's not one big score. It's usually a lot of myriad lighting and HVAC projects scattered around a campus or scattered around a building. And if you're going to get maximized savings out of central plant systems that look like this, it's complicated. There's no rules of thumb. There's no low-hanging fruit anymore. You have to think about the interactive trade-offs between the chillers, the cooling towers, the condenser water pumps 1 and 2, the primary, the secondary chilled water pumps, the coils and the supply fans, and how all those things work together. You can't solve it by hand, only numerically. And finally, even if you're a believer that the efficiency can actually benefit you, you might have reason to doubt. How much is reaching this efficiency reserve really going to cost me? Am I actually going to see a return on my investment? How do I know the savings are real? And your cynicism is actually right. In an ACEEE study, more than 20% of the efficiency measures performed less than 50% of their promised value within 3 years. It's not a great track record. And so I'm still hopeful, though, because if we look at our industry model, all the ingredients are here in order to tap the efficiency reserves at scale. This is not rocket surgery. What we have to do, I think let's go back to our oil and gas metaphor. Say you owned a piece of land and you had the mineral rights to that land. First of all, congratulations. The first thing you wouldn't do is get out your yellow pages and call a geologist. And then you wouldn't use that geologist's recommendations to make your own estimates on the reserves. And then at that point, even if you had an idea of what you were doing, you wouldn't call a drilling contractor, whoever they are, and then you wouldn't go to Home Depot and buy some PVC piping to run that oil down to the local fill station. You would call Exxon or Shell or Chevron or somebody to produce those reserves for you. But as an industry, this is precisely what we are asking you to do with your own efficiency reserves. We're asking you to take on a lot of risk. And so one solution could be to combine all these different separate offerings into what I term an efficiency developer. The idea would be similar to a mineral lease, in which case the efficiency developer would be, they would assume the risk and the cost to find and produce the efficiency reserves in exchange for a fee. Essentially, they would turn the efficiency reserves, because they're fairly well known, into a 10 to 30% return. And unlike oil and gas, these reserves come emissions free. So when we think about the status of buildings today and where we are, I kind of think it might be like Pennsylvania, circa 1860s. Rock oil, whatever that was, had just been discovered. But it would take years for a company to figure out how to bring that rock oil to scale and fundamentally change the energy economy. And so ironically, I think today to unleash the massive potential of our buildings, we might have to think more like Rockefeller did 140 years ago, just maybe without the monopoly.